You grew it. Good. Now make it last forever, because here is the brutal math of collapse. A tomato lasts a week. A jar of fermented tomatoes lasts 2 years. A head of cabbage rots in 3 weeks. Fermented, it will outlast your optimism by 18 months. Everything you spent months growing in that garden, every squash, every bean, every clove of garlic, has a death clock ticking from the moment you harvest it. And when the grocery stores are empty and the freezers stop working and there are no more canning lids on the shelf, that clock becomes your enemy. But fermentation is older than civilization. It is the technology that made cities possible. Before refrigeration, before preservatives, before shrink-wrapped packages with barcodes, human beings survived on fermented food. They ate alive food, food that was teeming with bacteria working on their behalf. And right now, most of that knowledge is in the dusty back room of history while everyone panics about canned goods and freeze-dried packets. Not you, not after this. This is how you ferment everything you grow, extend your harvest by years, and build a food system that does not need electricity, refrigeration, or a grocery store within 100 miles. Let us start with the one thing you absolutely must understand before touching a single vegetable. Fermentation is not rotting. The difference between the two is which microorganisms win. Rotting is random decay, mold, bad bacteria, entropy taking over because nothing was controlling the environment. Fermentation is intentional. You create conditions where the right bacteria, specifically lactobacillus, the same bacteria in your gut, dominate and outcompete everything dangerous. They produce lactic acid as they eat sugars, and that acid drops the pH of your food low enough that pathogens cannot survive. It is not just preservation, it is a microbial war you are deliberately winning. The weapon that makes this possible is salt. Salt is everything in wild fermentation. It pulls moisture from vegetables through osmosis, creating a brine. That brine becomes the battleground. Lactobacillus bacteria thrive in salt. They are halotolerant, meaning salt does not kill them, but most harmful bacteria cannot handle it. Salt selects for the right team. It creates a hostile environment for everything dangerous and a comfortable home for everything beneficial. This is why every fermentation tradition on earth, from Korean kimchi to German sauerkraut to Russian kvass, starts with salt. Get it wrong and you get mold. Get it right and you get medicine in a jar. The ratio you need to memorize is 2% by weight. That means for every kilogram of vegetable, you use 20 grams of salt. Do not have a scale? Approximately 1 teaspoon of salt per pound of vegetable, give or take. Use non-iodized salt. Iodine kills bacteria, all bacteria, and you need your lactobacillus alive. Sea salt, kosher salt, pickling salt, not table salt. Now let us talk about your garden and what to do with it. Cabbage is where most people start because sauerkraut is the most forgiving ferment there is. Shred your cabbage thin. Add your salt, 2% by weight. Then massage it, squeeze it, knead it. Work it like you are angry at it because you need to break down the cell walls and release the water inside. After 10 to 15 minutes of this, the cabbage will have released enough liquid to submerge itself. That liquid is your brine. Pack it into a jar. Press it down until the brine rises above the cabbage and weigh it down with a rock, a Ziploc bag filled with brine, or anything heavy and clean. The cabbage must stay below the brine. Anything above the brine is exposed to air. Anything exposed to air can mold. Cover the jar loosely. You need gas to escape as fermentation produces carbon dioxide. And leave it at room temperature. In 3 to 7 days, you have sauerkraut. In 3 weeks, you have deeply sour, complex, probiotic sauerkraut that will keep for months in a cool space. The colder the storage, the slower fermentation proceeds and the longer it keeps. The same process works for almost every vegetable in your garden. Carrots, shredded or sliced. Radishes, beets, green beans, left whole or cut. These are called dilly beans when you add garlic and dill, and they are extraordinary. Turnips, peppers, sliced thin. You can ferment them individually or together, and combining them is where the real creativity begins. Cucumbers are special because they are fragile. The enzymes in cucumber blossom ends break down cell walls over time, turning your pickles to mush. Before you ferment cucumbers, cut off the blossom end, the end opposite the stem. Even a thin slice is enough. Pack them whole into a jar with garlic, dill heads if you have them, grape leaves or oak leaves if you do not. The tannins in those leaves inhibit the softening enzymes and keep your pickles crisp. Make a separate brine, 2% salt dissolved in water, and pour it over until everything is submerged. Weight it down. Give it 3 to 5 days at room temperature, then move it somewhere cooler. Now let us talk about garlic because fermented garlic is one of the most underappreciated survival foods on the planet. Peel your cloves, pack them in a jar, cover in 2% brine. 3 to 4 weeks later, you have something that keeps nearly indefinitely, is easier to digest than raw garlic, has enhanced antimicrobial properties from the fermentation process, and tastes complex and rich in a way that raw garlic never does. In a world without antibiotics, fermented garlic is not a condiment. It is a medical supply. Hot peppers, fermented whole or blended into hot sauce, follow the same brine method. 2% salt, submerge. 3 weeks at room temperature and you have a shelf-stable hot sauce that preserves a massive caloric and nutrient punch from your pepper harvest. Blend the peppers after fermentation and the acidity preserves the result. No vinegar needed. The lactic acid does the job vinegar does commercially. Tomatoes complicate things because they are high in sugar and water and go soft quickly, but they absolutely can be fermented. Cherry tomatoes do best. Leave them whole. Nick the skin with a knife so the brine penetrates. Pack into jars. Cover with 2% brine and ferment 5 to 7 days. The result is tangy, savory, almost wine-like in depth. Full tomatoes can be fermented as a mash or crushed base, which you then strain and preserve as a tangy paste. Not the marinara you are used to, but in a survival context, concentrated preserved tomato paste is pure calories and vitamins. Green tomatoes, the ones that have not ripened yet and never will before frost, are actually ideal for fermentation. They stay firm, hold their structure, and take brine beautifully. Traditional Russian recipes have been fermenting green tomatoes for centuries. Stuff them with garlic and herbs if you have them. Pack them tight, cover in brine, and wait 2 weeks. Herbs from your garden do not ferment the same way vegetables do, but they supercharge every ferment you make. Dill, thyme, oregano, bay leaves, rosemary. Add them to your vegetable ferments during packing. They contribute flavor, and some of them, like thyme and oregano, contribute antimicrobial terpenes that help keep bad bacteria out. They also preserve reasonably well submerged in brine alongside other ferments. Beans, dried beans from your garden, can be fermented before cooking. Soak your dried beans, then let them sit in their soaking water for 1 to 3 days at room temperature. Wild bacteria and yeast from the bean surface begin a short ferment. The result is beans that cook faster, are dramatically easier to digest because the fermentation begins breaking down the complex sugars that cause gas and gut distress, and have improved nutritional availability. In a scenario where you are cooking over fire with limited fuel, beans that cook in 30 minutes instead of 90 is not a luxury. It is a fuel economy strategy. Grains grow in bigger gardens and become something extraordinary through fermentation. Sourdough is the obvious one. Wild yeast and bacteria from your environment captured in flour and water, maintained as a living culture, used to leaven bread indefinitely without commercial yeast. But beyond bread, fermented grain becomes kvass, the ancient Russian drink made from fermented rye bread that sustained armies through brutal winters. It is mildly alcoholic, nutrient-dense, and tastes like dark bread dissolved in time. You can make it from any stale grain-based bread. Crumble it into warm water. Add a small amount of sugar if you have it. Let wild yeast work for 2 to 3 days and strain. What you get is a beverage that hydrates, provides B vitamins, and contains enough mild fermentation byproducts to be safer than questionable water sources. Speaking of water safety, vinegar fermentation. If you are growing fruit, any fruit, apples, pears, berries, you can make wild vinegar. And wild vinegar is one of the most versatile survival chemicals you can produce. Press the fruit, let the juice ferment to alcohol via wild yeast over 2 to 4 weeks, then expose the alcohol to air and let the Acetobacter bacteria convert it to acetic acid over another 4 to 8 weeks. What you end up with is homemade vinegar, used for preserving other foods, used as an antimicrobial cleaning agent, used medicinally as a digestive aid and wound rinse. A small ongoing vinegar operation from surplus fruit is one of the highest leverage fermentation projects you can run in a survival garden. Now, equipment. People overcomplicate this. You do not need special jars, airlocks, crocks, or fermentation weights from a specialty store. You need jars, any glass jar with a lid. You need salt. You need water. The airlock improvisation is as simple as laying the lid loosely on top without sealing it or covering the jar with a cloth held by a rubber band. Gas escapes. Contaminants do not get in. If you do seal the jar tight, burp it once a day for the first week to release built-up carbon dioxide. No explosions, simple maintenance. Fermentation weights can be a small Ziploc bag filled with brine and pressed down into the jar opening, a smaller jar filled with water set inside a larger jar, a clean rock or a cabbage leaf folded over itself and pressed down. Anything that holds your vegetables below the brine line. Temperature matters but is not precise. Fermentation works between roughly 50 degrees and 85 degrees F. Colder means slower and more complex flavor development. Warmer means faster and sometimes more funky. A root cellar in summer is perfect. A cool kitchen corner in winter works. Avoid direct sunlight, which heats unevenly and can encourage mold. Here is the most important thing you will hear in this entire video. Trust the brine. A white film on the surface of your ferment is not mold. It is calm yeast, harmless, common, easily skimmed off. It looks alarming. It is not. Real mold is fuzzy, colored, and grows above the brine on dry surfaces. If you see fuzzy colored growth, remove it and check if anything below the brine is affected. Usually it is not. Submerged food in an acidic brine is protected. Surface growth is a nuisance, not a catastrophe. Skim it, check what is under it, and continue. The smell of a good ferment is sour, tangy, alive, like vinegar mixed with bread, with something earthy underneath. It should not smell like rot, which is sulfurous, putrid, and distinctive enough that you will know the difference immediately. Trust your nose. It is a fermentation sensor that evolution spent millions of years calibrating. Now you understand why this matters beyond flavor and novelty. A survival garden without fermentation is a garden with a hard deadline. Every vegetable has an expiration date, and when you hit it, the food is gone. But a survival garden paired with fermentation becomes a living food system that compounds over time. Your August harvest keeps through February. Your September glut becomes your January medicine. The bacteria doing the work for you are self-sustaining, require no energy input, and have been reliable preservation partners to human beings for 10,000 years. Every jar you fill is a hedge against hunger. Every pound of salt you stockpile unlocks the preservation potential of every vegetable you grow. This is not a cooking hobby. This is infrastructure. This is the same technology that kept our ancestors alive through winters that would end us now. The grid does not decide when your food expires anymore. You do. Start with 1 jar, 1 head of cabbage, 2% salt. Pack it down, keep it submerged, and wait. In a week, you will open something that has kept itself alive and understand deeply and practically that your garden just became something that can outlast almost anything. If this knowledge changes the way you look at the surplus in your garden, please subscribe and like this video. We are rediscovering the ancient survival skills that history tried to bury. Secure your future. The next chapter of self-reliance will be shared soon.